We're going to continue the discussion of the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. Previously, we talked about the aggregate demand, we talked about the long-run aggregate supply, and right now we're going to talk about the short-run aggregate supply. So as we look at our aggregate demand, aggregate supply model, let's consider an example where all the producers are producing at Y with a price level of P. And all these producers signed contracts with their employees that for the next year, they're going to pay them $30 an hour. Now, if the price level increases in that next year, meaning that the price of all the goods are increasing, well, if we think about if wages also increase, then it shouldn't change our output because everything is just a nominal change and nothing's changing in real terms. However, if my wages are fixed and they're not going to change, then I can hire more workers in the short run, produce more things, and sell them at the higher price level. And so that would lead me then to have what we think of as an upward sloping short run aggregate supply. So if price level were to go up, my output in the short run would also go up to Y2. And that's one of the explanations why we think the short run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping. Now there's three main reasons that are going to explain why it's upward sloping. So why upward sloping? The first, the example I just gave, is what we're going to call sticky wages. Is if wages can't adjust in the short run, then changes in price level might lead to more production in the case that the price level increases, or if the price level decreased, then I have to pay my workers more money and therefore will reduce our production and hire fewer workers. So once again, we have that upward sloping short run aggregate supply curve. The second one is similar to that. It's sticky prices. So oftentimes this is highlighted by a restaurant that prints menus. So in the menu, they print a price of the good or of each meal. And so if the price level changes and everything becomes more expensive, then the price of that meal doesn't change until they print a new menu. And that's what we think of as sticky prices. And that'll also explain why the short run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping. The third is similar, is just a misperception of prices, right? You think prices have fallen, so you behave accordingly and you produce less. If you think prices are going up, you produce more. All three of these have a common theme, and that is the quantity of output supplied deviates from its long run or natural level when the actual price level in the economy deviates from the price level that people expected. Now, this is what's going to cause an upward sloping short run aggregate supply curve, but why would the short run aggregate supply curve shift? Or what would cause it to shift left or right? Well, we're going to have a couple explanations. The first is the same things that are going to influence the long run aggregate supply curve will also affect the short run aggregate supply. So changes in the number of labor, in capital, or in natural resources will cause a shift in the short run aggregate supply. Second, just like long run aggregate supply, technology can also play a factor in shifting the short run aggregate supply. Now, the last thing that can also shift are changes in the expected price level. So if people change their perception and behave accordingly, this would also cause a shift in the short-run aggregate supply. So let's suppose we are at our natural level of output and we're operating at this point. If individuals think that the price level, they expect it to decrease, then they're going to operate out of this point here. And that's a shift in the short-run aggregate supply. So now we've talked about why an upward sloping short-run aggregate supply curve. We talked about what might cause that curve to shift. In our next videos, we're going to talk about the model combined, where we have our aggregate demand, our long-run aggregate supply, and our short-run aggregate supply, and see how do markets respond and how does this model explain short-run deviations from the natural level of output.